on business loans, it's not a thing. I don't know one lender that does 100% financing. So there always has to be some sort of down payment, almost always. So, I'll usually ask folks again, I'll have a great conversation going, things are going, and I typically will ask, okay, you've got a great plan, I like your numbers, everything looks good. What were you thinking about when you were putting this all together? What was your plan for a down payment? What were you kind of thinking about? What's the minimum? What's the maximum? And of course, sometimes it's, oh, well, I don't have anything to put down. Well, to be honest with you, it kind of ends there. Of course, we talk about what they can do to get there, but every loan does require some sort of down payment. If you were to Google and go to the SBA's website, you're going to read a lot that you could start a business for as low as 10% down. There are a lot of SBA loans that only require 10% down, but I can tell you right now, a startup business, what they do is 10% is the minimum. But then because it's a startup, they add 5%, so that's 15%. And then there's even other industries that are more riskier that they might add another 5%. So even though you might see 10% out there, I would probably go into this situation realizing that you probably should prepare for a 15% down payment. I don't have to do 20% often, so I wouldn't even bring that up. I can do 10% sometimes. It does work out. But 15% is definitely the number that you should be focused on. The other thing too is that I recommend to folks is what I call total project cost. So I'll have a lot of phone calls where someone may call for a loan. Let's just use a food truck as an example. I need $50,000 to get a food truck. I'm going to start a food truck business. And that's all they're focused on. Well, I try to help and coach them by saying, well, what other costs do you have in there? Well, I just want a loan for the food trailer. I understand that, and I want to help with that. But your presentation, our presentation to underwriters in the SBA should involve your whole cost. And why is that? Because you're actually telling the SBA, hey, it's going to cost me $2,500 for an attorney fee. It's going to cost me $3,000 for insurance. It's going to cost me $500 to get that health license. It's going to cost, you want to add all that cost up. Even though you're only asking a loan for the food trailer, you're basically, but by letting them know what all your costs are, think about that presentation. You're saying it costs this much, but I'm only asking for this much. So that's why it's really important when you're making a presentation or putting together your business plan to include the entire cost. So, and then what they do is they take that whole project, and then the 10% or 15% will be based on that total cost. So yes, that might contradict with what I just said. I just said it's important to include all your costs in your presentation, but by adding all those extra costs, you are increasing your minimum payment requirement too. So, so sometimes you got to meet in the middle. But down payment is an obstacle for many callers. So now there are different ways. So for example, if you're buying a business, okay, let's say you're not starting one up. Let's say you have an opportunity to purchase an existing business. There's different ways to approach that down payment, just so you know. you might have one of my favorite scenarios is when someone calls and they want to buy a business that includes real estate. But they say that the owner is willing to do a land contract. But I wanted to get financing through a bank. I don't want to do a land contract. Well, the reason why I like the way that call starts is because I know right away I'm dealing with a seller that is willing to do a land contract. In other words, they don't necessarily need all the money up front. So there are options. So when buying a business and I hear something like that, then and the buyer, maybe the buyer doesn't have enough for the down payment. You know, maybe it's a $250,000 loan or they just don't have it. Or maybe they've got a little, or maybe just to cover closing costs. But now I've got this seller that was willing to do a land contract. So what the SBA allows is they'll allow that seller to do a note, a separate note, to the buyer for that 10%. Because what you're creating there is have that scenario. I just got logged out again. That's all right. Any questions at this point? No? Okay. Yeah, what's the time? How long do I got? Okay, all right. So, okay. So I went through down payment. All right, let's talk about SBA requirements to get a loan. To get a startup loan, it is a long process. There's a lot to pull together, and it is a long process. Now, someone with experience, they can anticipate questions, they can anticipate issues, and so forth. So the SBA requires 3 years tax returns. They require a business plan. They require 3 years projections. The first projections are actually extremely important. I help a lot of folks out with projections because a lot of times, it's disappointing sometimes when I get projections and I can just see they just threw stuff in there. It's personally, it's not disappointing for me. I'll be honest with you. It's that if they're starting a business, they should be thinking about every single expense that they're going to run into. So 3 years projections are required. The first 12 months of those projections have to be very detailed, month by month, line by line. The second year and the third year projections can be just annualized. They don't have to be line by line. And at the end of the day, the projections have to show that there's enough to pay the loan. The other thing that's required, that the SBA requires, is a resume. They require what we call an opening day balance sheet. An opening day balance sheet is basically, it's basically a projection. It's saying the day I open my business, after getting this loan, the day I open my business, these are my assets, and over here are my liabilities. So that's what an opening day balance sheet is. The other thing that they require is a startup expense breakdown, which is something that you would put together in your business plan anyway. But, and then, trying to think here, the SBA, so the way the process works is that after submitting all the projections, the business plan, all of those things, it'll go through underwriting. They pull credit. Might ask some questions during the process. If the underwriting approves it, it then goes to the SBA. Now the SBA will do a background background check. So they will ask questions about any felonies. They'll ask for explanations about felonies. The other thing they do is if anyone has ever defaulted on a loan payment to the government, they're going to find it. So student loan, we get a lot of questions about student loan payments. We get a lot of questions about tax liens. So essentially, if you had an issue paying the government, it needs to be rectified. It needs to be taken care of before moving forward with the startup loan. It doesn't happen often, but last year I had a drunk driving. I think the gentleman had 3 drunk driving. DUIs, and they really gave him a hard time. I mean, really. And in other words, they first asked for explanations, and he provided explanations, and then we presented them, and they came back and they wanted more. And then we presented them again, and they wanted more. So to the point where the gentleman kind of just said, "Forget it," and it was. I did my best to try to bring them back, but hey, we're almost there. But so, anyways, the point is that they do background checks. So, okay. Kind of want to get back to your question. First of all, are there any other questions where I'm at right now as far as what's required, anything like that? Okay. All right. So I'm going to kind of answer your question in a form of, I'll get a call. I get lots of calls. I would say I get probably about 3 times a week. I'll get a call from a business owner that maybe has owned their business for a year, 2 years, 3 years, kind of new. And the question is, how do I build my business credit? So I'm going to talk about that right now. So my answer is, there really isn't such a thing as business credit. That's my answer. You may find a million different answers online. I'm telling you through my experience, I would say there's no such thing as business credit. And here's why. Because, it's like I mentioned, we use Experian. There's no such thing as a business credit report, but there is something where you can ask Experian if this business has ever, basically, Experian can say there are some bad records out there about this business. But it's not like a personal credit score, because a personal credit score, you have good things and hopefully no bad things, but you have all kinds of things happening to your personal credit score, so it generates a score. Yeah, basically, it is, if a business fails to pay another business, so to speak, and that business decides to report it, then it will show up on this report. But the difference is, right, is on the business side, there's no such thing as a business credit score. We're only looking to see if you got something bad out there. That's it. So, well then, a caller might say, but I want to build my business credit. A business loan is approved based on cash flow. It's every business loan lender out there, the very first thing they look for is there enough cash flow to support the proposed loan payment? And so what is business cash flow? Exactly how we describe personal discretionary income. It's the same thing. We look at the tax returns, and everybody that has a business and has done a business tax return, knows they have your revenue, and then you got your payroll expenses, you got your rent expenses, you got all these different expenses that you can deduct. You have every right to do it. But the bottom line number at the bottom, after all that stuff, income. That net income has to be enough to support the loan. So the challenge with small businesses, my wife owns a small business. I do her tax returns. So I'm telling you that I pretty much show her breaking even every year. Because we can. But on the other hand, because of my career, because of what I do, I will typically ask her as we're going into the end of the year, I will say, are you going to need any equipment next year? If you are you going to pay cash for it, or do you want to get a loan? Because if she says, yeah, I was thinking about buying this equipment, I've been looking into it, so then I know. Right away, I'm like, all right, how much is it? Okay, all right, 10% down or 20% down? Okay, I'm already calculating what that loan payment's going to be because I know how that tax return needs to look like in order to get that loan approved. So businesses are approved based on cash flow. Once that's done, the next question is, what's the collateral? And the thing with collateral is we call it advance rates. So if the collateral is real estate, it's a long-term asset. So a long-term asset, you can go over, you can have a loan go over 20 years on a long-term asset. So what does that mean? It means your loan payment's a lot smaller. What if they don't own the real estate, but they own equipment? Okay, all right. Well, equipment is a short-term asset. So the longest I can go out on equipment is 5 years. Big difference between 20 years and 5 years. So now your monthly payment goes up. The other thing too is on real estate, I can give your collateral credit up to 80% of that appraised amount. For equipment, I'm typically only going to give you 50% of what that equipment is valued. That's the difference between a long-term asset and a short-term asset. And then there's another way to look at it. Someone may not own real estate, may not own a lot of equipment, but they own a lot of inventory. Well, I'm still going to give 50% advance rate on the equipment, but I'm really nervous about the inventory. Now I might only do a 3-year loan or a 2-year loan on that. So that's just a little stint to talk about the difference between a long-term asset and what it could mean in getting a loan or a short